All right.
Are we live?
Yes, we
Are
are
we
live.
live? We're live. Okay. Okay, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Code, a podcast about digital transformation, low code, high code, any kind of code, the meaning of life, and everything in between. Now, on each episode, we're going to tackle a few subjects that we'll just throw out, and everyone in the panel will comment. We hope to sometimes bring new things to the matter. Sometimes we won't. So don't get your expectations up.
And we'll bring guests.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah,
And right now, you just have to put up with the three of us for this pilot one.
yeah,
Speaking
yeah.
of which,
Yeah.
it's the pilot one, so it's going to be even more awkward and disjoint than usual. So if we all survive to the end, it's already a success in our book. All right, shall we
Yep,
get
yep.
cracking?
By the way, before we start, of
Okay.
course, we are now going to introduce ourselves and so on. And I'll be having people from Russia assisting, people from Netherlands and so on. All of us have people from everywhere. And it like if you go on like presenting ourselves with the technical stuff like I work in this in that, it's like not very interesting. So I would suggest you guys to do a 10 seconds introduction of your technical background and 30 seconds introduction of yourself. And I hope that yourselves do not define by the job and by your work.
Okay,
Oh,
I can. I
okay.
think I can
Start.
start with that. Yeah, I can
Go
start
for
with
it,
that.
Armando.
So 10 seconds, right? Okay, 10 seconds. So I'm a freelancer. I do stuff with OutSystems. I started by being a middleware consultant a long, long time ago. And unfortunately, somehow I changed to OutSystems and I met these two guys that we are, doing this thing now. On 30 seconds for personal. So I'm a wannabe tennis player. So every time I have some free time, I'll be on the court trying to hit balls, imagining they are some people heads, you know. You know, that's the purpose of it, and breaking some strings. Beyond that, I will probably be eating or sleeping, and well, sometimes developing some cool things with OutSystems like applications that will let me know when the power runs out. Back
Oh,
to you.
all right.
That's
Who
that's
goes
cool.
next?
Miguel, you wanna go next?
Okay, okay. 10 seconds. Well, software engineer, OutSystems guy between several capacities for almost 19 years since the beginning of the company. Previous to that, video games programmer professionally. So that was basically it. Well, now I don't have anything to say in 30 seconds because I'm really a boring guy outside of this.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I'm,
true. That's true.
yeah, I'm a father of many girls. Yeah, I have a very big hobby, which is board games, mostly collecting them rather than actually playing them. I used to fancy myself as a rock star as in my youth, so I played the guitar badly. I sang worse. Yeah, so and these days, really, I am just a boring guy that tries to live to retirement, I guess, and
And
hang out with
now,
cool people like these two.
and
So
now let's
that's
get to
me.
Russia.
Yeah, and over to Russia. Over to Russia.
Yeah, that's kind of a Portuguese joke because in the news, not newspaper, but in the news, the correspondent in Russia would always go like something like that. It's missing the Kremlin behind me.
Oh yeah,
So,
our
10
budget is
seconds.
low. Our budget is low.
Um, Mediocre programmer, started with C++ and C, memory leaks and so on,
That
moved to
that explains a
OutSystems.
lot.
Yeah, moved to OutSystems as one was wondering like what kind of technology is this? Where is the code? I want to see the code and see the memory leaks. Eventually changed to a more front-end part, more experience and aware of like how the user interacts and how to improve the application in that perspective. Currently nowadays freelancing in that aspect. Personal, um, half crazy, half addicted to adrenaline. At certain point decided to pack my things, sell everything that I had, and grab on a backpack and go to Finland and to hike in the forest, which I did for 4 weeks in full autonomy, which led me to starve and to lose 5 kilos in the first week.
All
But
right.
nevertheless, I
You must be
survived.
this,
Yeah.
Armando, right?
Uh,
Yeah, that also explains a lot.
Oh, yeah. But nevertheless, I started there and I ended up in Singapore, like by land, and it was cool thing. This to say,
Singapore.
Hmm. Yeah, I actually Singapore as well.
mm,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
nice.
It's
So,
not nice. It's amazing.
in a
Yeah,
nutshell, climbing outdoors, and that's it, adrenaline.
sounds good. Sounds good. All right. So we did the introductions in a very kind of awkward and in a crazy way. So who wants to go first? Throw a subject on the table.
I can start. Okay,
All
so
right.
we started with the our introduction. Okay,
Mhm.
we started with our introduction, and we have a cameo from Andrea, which is our beloved community manager that is responsible for the events. But we are not going there yet, so let's go first with OutSystems. Nice tea, by the way. With OutSystems and how did it change our lives? Okay. But before we go into that, I wanted to ask you how did OutSystems enter it in your lives first?
Hmm.
Do you
Well,
want?
I can go first.
Okay,
So
okay.
it didn't enter on purpose. So I was tired of working with C++ and kind of troubleshooting or going around memory leaks for weeks after weeks in a library that I didn't build, that it was not even built by our company, and just putting console logs and analyzing gigabytes of console logs. And eventually, I just decided to go for Enough Contact, which is a program from the Portuguese government where young people apply and they can basically randomly be sent any place in the globe to work in their typically area. So to me, what happened was I was sent to San Francisco and to work with OutSystems. So that was how OutSystems actually entered in my life.
Okay. Um, Mine. Well, let me cast my mind back to the years old of 2001. OutSystems entered in my life when I actually got a call from Carlos Alves, who's still one of the VPs at OutSystems, saying, we're a startup company and here in Portugal, and we're starting with a new innovative project and product. Would you like to join? And I said, well, I never heard about these guys. Let me go over and actually meet them. And indeed, I went to the quintessential garage that every single IT company seems to start at, and met the initial founders of the company. And I was actually the first guy hired out into OutSystems. So everyone else had knew each other already. So I was like the first mistake that OutSystems made back in 2001. And then, like my life in OutSystems has been never changing in terms of roles, but I don't know if we're might be going into that. But the introduction itself to OutSystems was this: a phone call by Carlos Alves in 2001.
Okay, so I just got the information from our control center that our budget was increased, so our fellow mate in Russia is now moving to the Kremlin. Okay, so we
Is
can
it?
now, yeah, he's moving.
Not
Negative,
to the
negative,
Kremlin yet. Okay.
or actually affirmative.
Okay, okay, so
So Armando,
yeah, I started working with OutSystems 5 years ago. Because my good friend Fabio was like, "Oh, you should come work with me." It was not. He didn't say to me that he was going to beat me playing Forza Horizon, but well, I have to live with it. So it said like, "Okay, so why don't you join us? Start working with OutSystems. This is like cool, you know. It's orange balls." Boxes you just drag and drop, and I was like, yeah, real man, just write code. So 5 years later, I'm here.
Dragging balls
are you
around.
still a real
Exactly.
man, not writing code or writing low code?
Well, I try to. I try to. Sometimes it's not easy. Apparently, my camera just froze. Oh,
No,
okay.
you're back-ish.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, kind of. I don't know. In Portugal, we are so poor. We don't have even money for our proper internet connection. But beyond that, let's well, this is really shitty quality. Okay.
Yes,
Even
What did
worse
we
than
but
decide about
Russia.
swearing? Can we swear then?
Yeah. We're not
uh,
supposed to, but it's true because it's even worse than Russia. But nonetheless,
yeah, but
so
going back to the question, to the initial question, which is, or the important question, how did our systems change your life?
it didn't.
Okay.
What do you mean?
Okay, so I'm not going to tell a love story about how I love OutSystem. Well, actually like OutSystems. It's a really cool tool. Um, but it's a technology. I started, well, I was supposed to start, and now we can go a bit on the background. I was supposed to start as a middleware consultant, but then, as like every trainee in the IT world in your first job, you'll just do anything that needs to be done. So I was developing out systems, I was developing, well, not really out systems. I was developing with TIBCO. I was developing with .NET, with Java, SQL, and then I moved to OutSystems, and from that on, I just worked with OutSystems for the rest of my life up until today. Okay, so that's pretty much how it changed my life because it's a tool I use to make money. Okay, this is like raw as it can be. I hopefully hope, okay, being a bit redundant, but yeah, I hopefully hope that I can still use the tool for a long time being because it's a cool tool. I like to build stuff with it, and it makes my life a bit easier. Okay, and that's pretty much the story of it. Additionally, I have to thank OutSystems for one thing because if I was not using OutSystems, we would not be here. I would not meet you because I'm not sure if our listeners don't really know, but these two guys are absolute legends, and I still remember the first time I heard about them. Okay, so
Who's he
kids,
talking about?
I'm going to tell you a story of how I met my podcast partners. Okay, but this won't take 10 seasons. Okay,
Okay.
this will be very quick.
Yeah, please do.
So the guy on the top, the one without hair. Not, I'm not sure if it's by choice, but the one without hair. I the first time I saw him and met him, it was in Next Step 2016, 2016, I guess, in which you made a presentation about easy core mobile plugins because our core would be, would be very hardcore. Um,
For
my
OutSystems marketing.
yeah, it's really cool because I really forgot to turn on the focus assist on my computer. So everybody on the MVP and MVP Slack is like sending messages, not only for YouTube, but for Slack. So every now and then something just shows up on the screen. It's amazing. So please remember we are under an NDA, so don't say anything important.
Okay.
Neither
Yeah.
say bad things about these two guys. Okay, so this was how I met the guy with no hair, the guy with some
Some
hair.
hair.
Well, some hair, yeah. I think most of any. The guy with some hair. I started hearing about his amazing achievements when I was doing my support engineer training. We were talking about the search engine optimization, and everybody was, "Oh, it was Miguel who made it. That's why it sucks."
That sounds like a appropriate description for what it is. Yes, exactly.
No, I'm just joking. It actually works. It actually works. Okay, I'm just shit talking him.
Yeah.
But it actually works. And then we met. I just went next to him to, or searching for him in Next Step in Amsterdam, hoping I would get a prize. Unfortunately, I didn't get a prize.
Failing miserably. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And that's pretty much how I met these two guys.
Okay. So let's
Hmm.
see, changing
Okay.
my life. Okay, so now I'm gonna probably be a little bit more formal than my best guy before. Basically, it did and it did not change my life. So obviously the devices, the deliverables that you actually achieve with OutSystems are very different from my previous life as a video games developer. Obviously, I used to code games. Now I involved in developing enterprise applications, so the device is quite different. Obviously the look and feel of the languages behind any of these things that you produce is substantially different. In low code, we have, as Armando was saying, we have indeed drag and drops and like oranges and stuff like that. Not to mention orange balls.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Sorry to interrupt you. We have a comment from a spectator that says dragging circles, guys. Dragging
Drawing circle,
circles.
shaded circles. Okay, okay, shaded circles. That's we're gonna stick to that then. And basically, what happens is the flow is different, but it is a bit of a misapprehension when people think, oh, with low code comes like toy apps and the kind of challenges, technical challenges that you need to use your mind for will be substantially different and smaller. That's definitely not the case. So in effect, the little gray cells, as the Poirot used to say, they still work exactly the same. So the thought patterns, having to unblock yourself from crazy things, finding bugs, integrations, race conditions, all those kind of things are still very useful in your toolbox. So in that sense, life really hasn't changed that much. So effectively, you still exercise the same mental muscles that you did in other languages.
Yeah, so just a quick comment here. We are all Portuguese, okay? In Portugal, we don't say unblock ourselves, we say uncheat ourselves.
Yes. Okay. And I'll go with that. We uncheat ourselves. Yes. So, Ruben, did it? Did,
Wow. Well, I wouldn't call it change my life for sure. Let's just say that it gave me a different perspective indeed. So before OutSystems, as I was telling in my introduction, I worked for 2 years in the software house as well in the R&D team, where I was responsible for components that were used in a contact center for playing the music when you are hearing the music and you are putting the digits like for this option click one. So I was the guy responsible for that.
not the sexy
And
voice.
no, not the sexy voice.
Ah,
No, just the guy
shame.
responsible for putting it to play and actually do something. And nevertheless, the thing is, when I entered the company, this was already built and sometimes had issues and bugs, especially for large volumes of contact centers. And well, I was very into the code, very much into the world of code, server code, and debugging and the troubleshooting and the memory leaks, understanding what was happening, develop programs to analyze gigabytes of logs,
Mhm.
really gigabytes of logs, and so on. And when I came to OutSystems, when I moved to OutSystems, it was really a shock. Like, where the hell is the code? Like, I want to see the code. Oh, but you don't need. I do. You don't need. How do I know that the code doesn't have bugs? You, you just don't. You don't need. And this actually bring me to the thing that I was saying, that it made me do a mind shift in terms of technology for technology, but rather technology has a tool, has a means to an end, has an experience to whoever is going to use it and so on. And I think that that was, or that for me is the big thing about possibly any low code, but specifically OutSystems low code, or even no code eventually in the future, is that you are not focused in the details that actually they are not, it's not those details that bring value, because bottom line, the majority of people are not working in competitions, in programming competitions where the fastest algorithm, the fastest cycle is the best one. No,
People want to
applications
get
are,
shit done.
yeah, people want the applications to actually do something that will increase the business or that will do something for the business. And this shift, mind shift, is actually almost like elevating yourself a little bit from the forest where you are seeing memory leaks and elevating from the forest and seeing like how all of this forest is contributing to the surroundings, how all of the animals are actually living from the forest. I'm not
Yeah.
calling users animals, by the way.
Okay.
So that was the shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's also a side to
But by the,
there's also a side
I
to it.
just wanted to,
Okay,
yeah,
finish.
Finish
Okay,
go
it
for
off,
finish.
it.
guys. Just stop
Yeah.
talking after each other, please. Thank you.
You know, guys, this is a technical part of delays of network.
Yes.
So
Network in Russia.
Do you wanna
much better than in Portugal, I can say.
Yeah, definitely.
so do you wanna finish your thought, Ruben?
No, I actually wanted to finish with a question, so please go ahead.
Okay, so and taking from what you're saying, I think as you and I'm, you wouldn't say, but I'm actually, the oldest of these three guys. I look the youngest one. I know, uh,
You could be our
and
father, yes.
and I think indeed as you progress in your career, as Ruben was saying, maybe your interests shift. Certainly, they did shift in mine, and the value proposition in the current world is really one of the technology wisdom isn't quite as highly priced as it was, but being able to solve the right problems. And I think indeed when your technology that you use liberates you from, as it were, wasting time on intricacies and gives you more time to look at the broader forest, as Ruben was saying, you effectively become, in the new economy of value, you become a more interesting asset. So even from the point of view of an egotistical interest, you are betting, insofar as we can say, because we never know the future, as far as we can say, you're betting in a much nicer retirement for you than just being an old-fashioned coder. And I was an old-fashioned coder for a long time, and I loved it.
I disagree.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
What?
I kind of. What did you disagree?
Yeah,
I
I'm
We
curious
were
now.
disagree.
supposed to agree with
No,
Miguel.
no, no, no.
Yeah,
Remember?
yeah.
No,
Let's
no,
put
no,
the
no, no.
technical difficulties thing right. let's let's
That's
slug this out.
no, it's for this side. Okay. Um, no, I had my goals when I was younger, and my goals are still the same, which is getting rich and do nothing.
But that's what I'm saying. The way you get rich substantially shifted from when I started, like in the 80s and the 90s. Well, if you want to be a technology guy, obviously, if you want to be an investment banker,
Yeah,
it's
now
it's always been the
yeah,
same.
exactly. They invented the Euro Millions, so now you can try to have your
Yeah,
luck at it.
I've given up on that one.
Exactly.
Well, that is actually not a new invention, you know that, right?
Yeah, it's been in one shape or another been for a while.
Yeah,
For quite a few centuries.
Okay,
Well,
guys,
but
shall we move on to a different subject?
probably.
Or
actually, I
have
have a
we?
question before
Yes,
that because,
question.
Oh my God!
uh,
Here comes the
yeah, yeah.
scary unscripted
I'm
stuff.
sorry. Yes. So actually, just a small thing for everyone to understand is Miguel is the guy that kind of organizes, wants everything like, okay, we'll do like this. I'll say this, he'll say that. And Armando is like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, no, wait, what about this? And this is the question like, we are talking about OutSystems, but what the heck is OutSystems?
Oh, this is going to
Okay.
be a long podcast, right? I presume that if you're listening to this,
Okay.
you kind of already know what it is.
Maybe,
Okay.
maybe not.
Yeah,
Then 30 seconds,
we'll
30
we'll we'll
seconds,
put
guy. Just
we'll put we'll put the link in the we'll put in the link in the description. I've always dreamt of saying this. Link in the description for what is our systems.
Okay, we can put a link to OutSystems, yeah.
uh, no fun,
Okay,
no fun with that. So
but
if there's no fun in that, okay, next step. What were your thoughts? Because both of three of us were actually Armand was in two next steps
Yeah,
in
I
the
was.
Americas and in Europe,
Yep.
and me and Miguel, I think that we were only in Netherlands, in Amsterdam.
yeah, we're
So
we're the poor people. Yeah, he's Portuguese and he's living in Portugal.
Yeah,
So
that does not compute.
yeah, there you go. So Armando,
so
give us a comparative overview of next steps from your vantage point.
Okay, okay. I'm not sure if I can say without getting in trouble, but
you can. There's always alumini, no
yeah,
problem.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's always being erased from as
There's
well.
always
So
aluminium.
yeah, yeah. Okay, I was going to make such a bad joke. Uh, okay, so comparing both next steps, and maybe okay, let me start differently. Maybe we should start by saying what was in the next steps, and then we can do a comparison. Because comparing without explaining, people might just, get confused. We left.
Fine,
Oh,
fine, fine.
oh,
All right. Okay. So do you want to talk about some of the highlights then of next
I
step
will let Ruben.
as content?
I will let Ruben do that because he's such a
I,
passionate
oh,
person.
So,
I
Ruben,
see.
you're on the spot.
Come on.
I see. Okay, so next step, I was in Amsterdam, and in this next step, it was introduced a new version of the platform, and the highlight of the new version of the platform that is still number 11. We still haven't changed. Our system still hasn't changed to 12, and no one knows when that will happen. But doesn't matter. It's a new
If
version, and it's actually a doesn't matter. That there's the point, and it's actually a pretty cool version. Why? Because between us, finally, it actually has what it was called reactive web apps, and that's not a topic for now. So let's not discuss names and nomenclatures. But it's basically the new feature of you being able to build mobile, not mobile, but responsive apps with the underlying technology, with the same underlying technology that we were building mobile apps, meaning enabling the apps really to be responsive, really to be reactive to the user. Um, it's a major achievement. The ability of being able to do low code, client-side low code. Of course, there's always the need of JavaScript and so on, but it makes it so much easier and really much better applications. Not only that, but OutSystems also introduced a couple of new tools that, in my opinion, or new tools that their primary focus is citizen developer. And I'd say that there are other tools in the market, low code, that had already tackled that citizen developer. And I believe that this new version of OutSystems is what is really tackling the citizen developer with low code or almost with no code, how it could even be called. So for me, these are the big highlights, these new tools, and of course the response reactive web apps.
Okay. Well, on that subject, I mean, it hasn't been rolled out yet, but there was already a mention of PWAs and progressive web apps. Ruben, I think probably you're in the lead in this particular subject. What is your take on that?
But weren't you going to talk about next step?
Well,
no,
we
we
can
can
come
always
back.
switch
We
subjects.
can
Yeah.
come back to the next step.
Okay, next step. Yeah, next step. One of the things that I also saw, and that was I was already a little bit afraid because being working as an MVP, I've been in close contact with the newest release of the platform before it came out, so I was already trying out things, and the reactive at first, when the first time that I had contact with the name, it was even React web app, not even reactive, and I thought that they were kind of surfacing the underlying technology. By the way, for those that don't know, the underlying technology in this case is React.js. And I think that they were surfacing the name, and I was like, big, what the fuck? Because uh, I remember when I was still in OutSystems
Yeah.
and when it was when
Shots
the
were
mobile
fired.
part, yeah, when the mobile part was built, there was created the R&D did a great job of creating an abstraction of whatever they would use, meaning could be nowadays React, could be in the future Angular or Backbone or any other technology. Doesn't matter. So they created an abstraction layer that enabled them to replace really easily the technology underneath. And that was fantastic. And then I saw reactive web apps. I was like, what, why are you guys surfacing? And then I started understanding, even before next step, that that was not the reason. And I was like, guys, this name is, I actually passed feedback, guys, this name is horrible. Like people will think that it's either the technology or they'll just get confused. And that's what happened. People really got confused. And I heard all sort of like reactive web apps and progressive web apps and what is the difference and like huge confusion. And the funny thing, huge confusion at the, even on people that work in OutSystems. And I
You
was
were
like,
not supposed to say that.
There's no confusion in OutSystems
Yeah,
ever.
it
exactly.
was
No,
it
no.
was it was nice to meet you guys. Maybe we can
Yeah,
still
yeah.
do podcast next time.
Let's
Nevertheless,
talk
let
about
me try.
non-controversial issues next time, like
Yeah,
war and
yes.
famine,
Yeah.
politics.
So let's actually let me try to clarify a little bit, and I also want your thoughts on this, for sure. Let's start by the PWA versus RWA. The only first letter is the difference, right? Responsive and progressive. We can define them as one being a implement one being experience about experience, and for that we are talking about responsive web apps. That's a concept of experience. And the funny thing is, when I was actually trying really to understand a little bit more, like what Paul Rosado meant with responsive, not responsive, reactive, I'm sorry, reactive web app, what he was mentioning with reactive, I eventually stumbled upon a book that is even called Reactive Web Apps, and it was written by Manuel Bernhardt. So, and it's actually not fairly recent, but the whole thing, it's a concept. And the concept is a reactive web app. It's built on top of components that communicate asynchronously. And as they do, they react to user and to system events synchronously. And the result is that they become scalable, responsive, and fault tolerant.
Mhm.
That's the it's so basically you can assume that this is a concept, not technology, not nothing. It's a concept, a big concept. And for
And
example,
therefore,
you can
you don't. Your objection about the use of the name reactive was diluted when it was indeed the experience and not the underlying JS
my
framework,
concern
right?
is that my concern is that it would generate confusion
Mhm.
as it actually did and still does. Um, and this to just finish on the reactive is that even Java and Scala developers of those technologies, they can use frameworks like Play or toolkits like Akka to do exactly the same, to do responsive web apps,
Reactive.
reactive web apps.
We
Yeah,
need to
God damn it.
overdub the word responsive at the end of
Yeah,
the video.
it was so much in the. Nevertheless, so this is a concept. When we go to PWA, you can see it has an implementation of this concept. So PWA, it's technical. PWA, it's progressive web apps. And this, what it stands for, or what does it mean to be a progressive web app? A progressive web app has several characteristics and several things that are important to be considered a progressive web app. First of all, slightly redundant, is that they are progressive. What it means is that they are designed in a way that any user can use them independently on the browser and what the browser supports. So the application is supposedly to gently deprecate their features,
Mhm.
but still enabling the experience where the browser allows it to have. It should be responsive because it should work in every device, phone, tablet, computer, wherever. It should be faster after first initial load.
Mhm.
Okay, so when you are loading, just like you have a mobile app in our systems that is loading longer
The
and then it
resources, yeah.
starts, yeah, loading the resources. That's one of the crucial definitions. It should be connectivity independent, meaning should be working offline, even if some of the features are not fully, but they should be working offline. It should be app-like, and that means that the style of navigations of interactions should be app-like native,
Mhm.
should be closer to that. So the idea is for the difference between native and web to start diminishing and disappearing. Should be fresh, meaning always update. Just like applications in our system should be safe, HTTPS, discoverable, meaning the search engines can look for them and you don't need actually an app store to distribute them. It should be re-engageable, as in push notifications, installable, no app store, and linkable.
Yeah, and I actually want to focus there because the progressive, the big drive for progressive, apart from these technological concerns and experience concerns, once you're actually in there, you focus the no app store thing, and I think there is indeed one of the selling points is that you opt to have a progressive app in the moment you're interacting with whatever the provider of that service is. So you were just in your browser, you went to a homepage of say an insurer, and there and then, I mean, you've got the focus on trying out this particular insurer, and he gives you the option of downloading the progressive web app. So the conversion ratio for the distribution of progressive web apps make it very interesting for the people who develop it, rather than the somewhat disjoint experience of searching in a store that's got millions of apps. So the matter of discoverability is better resolved because you know what you get it because you're looking at it right now. And I think regardless of the technology, and I think to a certain extent that's where you were trying to get at, Ruben. I mean, it's not necessarily pinned to and technology, because indeed you can have they are normally reactive and they are normally responsive. So all these other concepts that we hear associated are not disjoint from a progressive web app. The thing that I see it as the most obvious one is indeed the delivery, and where do you get it, and what frame of mind you are when you log into your local copy of.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, the what I was trying to also to first is to define. So to define exactly the two concepts. So these are reactive web apps are concept of experience. Progressive web apps we can consider it as an implementation of this, the technical implementation of this concept. How the name on systems lies in between of these is that nowadays, the applications that you would be able to create with OutSystems reactive web apps, uh, it's not a progressive web app. Not all of the capabilities, not all of the characteristics are there yet, so it cannot be considered a progressive web app
Mhm.
first. And the second thing is actually a very uh, not necessarily marketing, but very humane thing, which is when you are developing systems until now, you had, okay, mobile or web. And suddenly now there's a new web. So what the heck is going to be the name of that new web? So what I believe that OutSystems did is like mobile is mobile, still native functionality when you want native plugins. Then you have traditional web, which is the old web, old way of making a web, and then you have reactive web. So it's just a matter of actually distinguishing templates. Can be as simple as that. And in the future, I can imagine that traditional web apps will disappear, and we
Let's
can have a discussion on that.
on another one. Yeah, yeah, on another of these. Stay
We can
tuned,
have.
guys.
and and the name will then suddenly be still mobile and web, and the web will be progressive. It will be reactive. Doesn't matter the name. It will be just web, possibly. Just simple. Web and mobile.
Sounds good.
In a few
Okay.
years from
Armand,
now, yeah.
you are far too quiet.
Yeah, I'm so
Yeah,
quiet.
he's waiting for
I'm just
the
listening. I'm just
for
listening,
the
actually.
for the ball to come back in his court, to use a term of a tennis player.
hmm So I
So
can hit forehand inside out
yeah,
to
yeah,
your
yeah.
backhand.
But you were going on about the comparative next steps
Okay.
across the Atlantic.
Okay.
That's where
Yes.
we were,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. So yeah, next step is like if you have got this by now, next step is OutSystems global conferences in which new features of the product or new versions are released, in which you have multiple demos, multiple cool things from partners and customers, what they were able to achieve with OutSystems. And if I had to compare both, I have to say, and please don't take me wrong, I actually prefer the Amsterdam one. I prefer the.
All
Come
right.
on, just because of the cookies. Come on, Herman.
No, 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 no. I'm a wannabe tennis player. I can't go into that route, okay? Because we never know when the doping control comes to our door. Not only that, but um, even the venue, the partners showing up things, even the little events, the sessions were different, and I thought it was not really from the session sides because I'm really talking out of my head here, but they were fairly similar. Okay, probably there was an overlap, a significant overlap between the sessions in Denver and Amsterdam in terms of content. But in terms of the venue, in terms of the way everything was organized, I think Amsterdam was way better. And obviously, because we are having some viewers stating a few comments. Okay, they are commenting on our live stream. We have
Medo.
one fellow MVP saying that Armando is the Stroopwafel. That's how you say it. Stroopwafel monster. And yeah, Amsterdam have freshly baked Stroopwafels. So that's a
Okay.
win for me.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to go a little bit on a tangent here, and well, it's still going to be about next step, but I'm actually going to air out the point that has been put forward by a few people, which is the next step, which I concur. I think it was a fairly balanced content wise between like technical tracks and business tracks. I did like the venue, but a lot of people sort of say, next step, ODC. Last year it was so much fun to have the ODC. Should we have next step separate? And a lot of the people tackle like the necessity of having them both because of diminishing content, because when you combine, yes, obviously you need to end up cutting a little bit the content to fit everything, but I personally didn't feel that was the main challenge, or the main point that could be argued for having a separate one is indeed, and I cycle back to the point where we were talking about the growth of developers when they move to low code technologies, is naturally you develop, or many of us develop, an interest in the business side of things. So while when you're a developer in other technologies, really the technology takes up all of your time, and therefore you're just naturally not that interested in knowing about the stuff beyond the code, as it were. Yeah, you see, like, product placement here. um, so what I feel and what I do see in OutSystems developers is, by and large, they're a fairly business savvy crew, and I think that is the biggest disconnect in having one event. Is I couldn't be in all tracks at the same time, and
Yeah,
I
but
genuinely
that's
wanted to be on both tracks at the same time.
okay. So luckily in Amsterdam we had the sessions recorded. So if you have missed any of the sessions, you can go to I think it's on the Next Step website. You
No,
have
they,
the
they,
links.
they they
Links
they
to
are
the session.
there, and God forbid you watch mine as well, but it still does, it feels like food that's warmed up, right? You're not in there, you're not elbowing to get into the room. There's that friction, that cool friction experience that you don't get, the flow that you don't get when you watch it afterwards. So I do think that it's not a big problem if next step remains this dual mode, single event. But the ODC people might have a point, because if they want to go full on the code and full on the business side, you cannot
Uh,
do it
uh,
at the same time.
can I do a comment on? I'm going to do it nevertheless. I'm not going to
Yes,
ask
I'm
your
sure
choice.
you are.
This reminds me the one of the many stories when I was back in the forest and hiking and starving, I would spend the whole day thinking about bread. And yeah, that's the thing, my thing. And I was really starving, by the way, guys. And one of the things, one of the days, I found an energy bar in a shelter, like abandoned in the middle of the forest. And it was like uh, heaven sent. And I was like, oh. And this to say, when you say that people are business tech savvy and the food that is warmed up, if you are not appreciating, it's because you are not savvy enough. It's because you are not curious enough. It doesn't matter when the food is delivered. If it's delivered and that you are hungry, you are going to eat it and love it. And that's something that actually some of the days we will discuss is how people nowadays, due to many reasons, are becoming so not savvy for anything, so not curious, so not engineers like Edward um, from our MVP group described is an engineer is someone that asks and goes for the why, how and why things work and why things happen. And the technician doesn't just solve problems. So this to say, it really profounds me, affects me when someone says that because it's not live and we have to rewatch it, it's not interesting, or people simply don't. It just messes with my system a lot.
Well,
Really.
I understand where you're coming from, but I think it's a matter of a lot of the times the opportunity cost. So if you're sitting in an event, maybe your boss has already said, yeah, you've got those couple of days blocked off, and you can indeed go into threads that maybe are not in your current challenge, and you just happen upon them, and you kind of very organically know about these matters because you're in there, the time is locked off, etc. I find that consuming content afterwards for me, and especially when you have bigger constraints in your life like families and stuff like that, it gets like squished to a much smaller time. So I find that I consume a lot of technical content, but normally it's because there's a fire going on in the project. Let me look how this thing really works, and then you do it. And I don't think I'm the biggest sinner of this particular sin. I actually have a curious mind, but I do just pragmatically see that a lot of the times the opportunity to just waltz into a talk that you weren't really in firefighter mode for that subject is a very interesting way to know about other areas of the in this case the technology for a technical track, or business discovery, business challenge if you're in the more businessy track.
Sure, sure. And I can give you the example of myself because actually, when I was in Next Step, I didn't go to any session, and I was really feeling bad. But what saved me was like
He likes
with the
to,
fact that they're all recording.
yeah, he
And
likes
the
to watch
reason why I didn't go is because it's like this is the moment where I can actually meet and talk with people, and that I only see in the forge or in the forums, or that I only see in calls, or I don't see at all. So this is the moment. So for me, Next Step ends up being very social and connection because it's in this point in time that I'm able to meet, for example, Armando Gomes that was meet all the time making jokes. And at the beginning, I was telling to Vera, I'm going to punch that guy. And she was like, no, 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 he's funny, he's funny. I
Oh,
was like, no,
you
he's
already
not.
got violence, swearing. I mean, this is like we need to put like an
No,
18
no,
plus
no,
on the channel, man.
no. Yeah, you know that YouTube now has we
We're
have to
being
define the
delisted.
content. Yeah, no, not really, because I marked as non-child safe, so it should
Okay.
be like over 18. So
All
I
right.
think we are safe on that
Perfect,
subject.
perfect, perfect.
Speaking of safe on the
Um,
subject, we can not discuss how long this is going to be. Just telling my fellow presenters that we're 50 minutes in.
Nah, it's
So
okay.
yeah, okay. Oh, so 2 more hours, right?
I think my boss is watching,
no,
so as long as I don't hear any complaints, we should be fine.
Okay. All right. Okay.
no.
But
But let's
but
let's limit
let's
in
let's
for
wind
10
let's
more
wind
minutes.
down.
Yes, yes,
I'm gonna
yes.
pretend to be
Because
the
Or
moderator, like in TV shows, and he waves the pen and sort of says, "Guys, let's try to now less comments or less." Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So getting back to next step, I can actually share not my experience between Amsterdam and Americas because I was not in Americas. Speaking of which, guys, we are being extremely rude. Our friends in America are having their Thanksgiving, so
Oh,
we
that's
should
right.
wish them a good Thanksgiving today and
Thanksgiving.
all great for their family and for their
And
whatever.
it's not
I don't
only
know.
America. I think there's quite a few other countries, but we normally associate it with
Ah,
America.
that's imitation of Americans, no, not problem. So,
and
this
tomorrow
to
it's
say,
Black Friday.
in Portugal it's just to get robbed even more than before, so I don't matter. In
Don't
Russia
say it
it's not
like
a
that.
big
Don't
thing
say
as
it
well.
like that.
Nevertheless, so what I can compare next step is with the previous editions. So between so I actually started working on OutSystems in 2009, and I think that the first next step that I went it was 2010. And then 2013 was the first one that I started speaking, and then I spoke in almost all of them until 2016. And what I clearly see, it's clearly a different level of organization. And
Mhm.
of course, also OutSystems is much bigger. So in a way, I would like to congratulate the team of OutSystems. In another way, it's like um, you are doing a good job, it's still your job. In a way, guys, don't take me wrong, and please because I know that the event is growing so much that the people that are organizing it are more and more under pressure. But I see it as more and more organized as I would imagine a company of this size having an event organized. There are still some things that need to be, in my opinion, improved, as always, but a clear tendency is a lot more customers sharing their stories, just mingling and talking with other customers, and a lot more partners really engaged and really to call attention to them and to get people to know their work and their name and uh, and in a way sadly of course also less OutSystems employees because to be honest and straightforward in the first events of OutSystems a big portion of the people attending
It was a
were
private party mostly.
it was a private party a lot. So nowadays it's like not that really. It really felt and Netherlands really felt extremely well organized, I would say.
Yeah,
Yep,
that's
yep.
true. That's true. I do miss next step in Lisbon though.
Yeah.
But then
Come
again,
on,
a
just
field
Let's
because
trip,
put
it's
it.
field trip to
Let's put
field trip
a
to
word
Amsterdam.
in here so that they create because you're actually the only guy who is in Lisbon, so you probably like to take the bus. But Ruben and I
no,
No,
he,
actually want to
he
have an
he's a
excuse
tennis
to go
player that
there.
doesn't like to walk. He's a tennis player that doesn't like to walk.
yeah, I don't need to. I don't need to. I just need to, just shoot the ball everywhere. The ball needs to go. I don't need to go. That's my motto. But well, I have to say I like the field trip to Amsterdam, and although we have one very specific viewer asking me to not say it like that, I have to say that the land of top waffles, it's really amazing. I really like it. Although a bit cold because I went almost directly from Singapore to Amsterdam, so I went from plus 30
32,
to yeah
always
to
32.
10 degrees, something like that. So I really miss Singapore just
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
record.
But regarding the sessions that you attended
Yeah,
and the
I attended.
alcohol that you drink and so on, what do
No,
you
no,
think
no,
about?
no alcohol, no alcohol, because what happens in the MVP lounge stays in the MVP lounge. That's the rule. Okay. About the session. So I went to this amazing session, okay, which was mine because I had to present.
Wow.
Uh, no, it was actually not that good, but I had to, at least I had to show up on mine, right? Um, but then I made the same as Ruben. I just went there mostly to meet people, to see people that we only see one time. Well, you just see them once a year, right? Unfortunately, so maybe that's something that we should do more often, like a gathering. So if people responsible from OutSystems are hearing this, we would really love to have
Yeah.
this, like a filter, not to Russia because
Nudge,
it's really cold.
nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Say nama.
Yeah, but I found even and now going a bit into the comparison, and even about the audience, I felt that the European audience was more technically focused, while the audience from the US
US.
was more business oriented. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's actually very interesting. Very interesting.
But that's probably a
That
byproduct of the DNA of the people in the two continents, right?
Probably,
no, it can
probably.
no, it can actually mean also, sorry to interrupt, that it can also mean that the different profile of people that are attending, meaning the profile of people attending next Amsterdam are more technical, and the profile of people on America might be more business
No,
Yeah,
but
and
oriented.
that's what I mean. If you take a sample of the people who gravitate around out systems in the US, you'll probably, hit 10 a ratio of like 10 business minded, engagement minded people to actual developers that live in the continent, versus what you see in Europe, where as being a development kind of center per excellence, you'll just bump into more techies.
yes,
But
yes.
this could be a subject for a next talk, right?
True,
Like
true. That's
the
true because,
evolution of the DNA of OutSystems related people.
or at least
Oh, that
the developer base, because I think that was the difference. Uh, but nonetheless, I enjoyed all the gifts I could take with me. The socks, the socks are very comfy, just for the matter. Okay. So if you have, or if you had the chance to get some socks, I hope you are happy with them, because with this cold winter, although we are still not in the winter officially,
come
uh,
on, what's the temperature in Portugal
Yeah,
now?
exactly.
it's way colder than what it should be. I really don't know, but let me check. I can get my. Let me, if you give me a second.
So okay,
Uh, I
I'll
think my
hum
phone
some
says
elevator music.
80 degrees.
That's pretty good.
Not too bad. Not too bad.
Just
Okay.
around 20 degrees difference. So, Miguel, and your thoughts on the next step
No, as
regarding like sessions that you might have attended and
well,
or that you haven't seen it.
I've indeed suffered a little bit from the same problem that you, well, problem, quote unquote, which is, you end up being involved in the social aspect of it more than the sessions. I did think the sessions that I attended, I kind of split them half half. I think they were the technical ones were good, especially the ones which had the participation of people from out systems itself, because they showed a little bit light of what was what was coming. So there was a teaser side to it. But I think across the board I share indeed an evolution on the maturity of, well, the subjects and the quality of the presenters. Obviously there's always been great presenters in the past, but a lot of the times when you moved outside of the select few from out systems, then you would get kind of slightly more uninteresting people. And now I think there's more compelling stories across the board. So I thought it was a very balanced, presentation, or set of presentations, I should say.
Okay, so
Cool.
although I really like enjoying your company, I have work to do.
Yes, we
Yeah.
So
all do,
So,
and we're approaching the 1 hour.
yes,
So we're
yeah.
2 minutes
So,
away
exactly.
from 1 hour.
Before I get fired.
Okay.
So if you had to leave us with one last thought, what would it be?
Well, I'll go with one. So the last thought is, we're not sure yet how frequent this is going to be, guys, that are watching this either in line or at a later point. We're not
Show your love below.
show your love below. So click like and subscribe. And yeah, so we cannot tell you guys it's going to be like next month or whatever. We're going to make it like frequent enough. And let us know, in terms of the format, in terms of what we can improve. And that would be really my main takeaway is, let's try to make it better next time by the feedback of people.
Oh, and if by any chance you want to join us next time, just let us know.
tan
This
tan
is to the audience, right?
tan.
Yeah,
Oh,
obviously.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Do it.
You
Do
guys
reach
He
should
out
be
to
doesn't.
us.
here, of course.
Yeah, if
You
you
guys
want to
should be
take
here.
part of the
That
panel,
that was
absolutely.
Yeah, that could be slightly direct, indirect. Like if you want to join Miguel next time, we'll consider that and maybe think about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, guys, so I think that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching us and hope to see you next time. Bye bye.
Sayonara, people.